The battle drums echoed through the vast, circular arena of Vorexal, shaking the ground beneath the warriors' feet. Towering figures of Selvera elites lined the viewing platforms, their obsidian exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial suns above. The air smelled of scorched metal and sweat, thick with the tension of an upcoming fight. Commander Vorexia stood at the center of the training pit, arms crossed over her chest, her midnight blue armor pulsating faintly with the energy cores embedded in her shoulders. Her tall, muscular frame was built for war, and her piercing golden eyes studied the human standing across from her with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. She had fought countless battles, bested the most ruthless warriors, and crushed enemies twice her size. Yet here, before her, was a human male, unarmored, with only a simple combat suit hugging his form. He looked unimpressive. Callan Drake, she repeated his name aloud, as if testing the weight of it. You are the Terran warrior they sent to challenge me. Callan stood relaxed, his hands loosely at his sides, his expression unreadable. His dark brown hair was cut short, and his hazel eyes glimmered with something that unsettled Vorexia. Not fear, not hesitation, but confidence. He wasn't as bulky as Selvera warriors, but he was lean and sharp, like a blade meant to cut rather than crush. He gave a small, cocky smile. That's me. The Selvera watching from the stands burst into laughter, deep and mocking. To them, Callan looked fragile, breakable, insignificant. They had seen humans before, soft-bodied creatures who relied on machines rather than true strength. Vorexia didn't laugh. She had seen fear before, and Callan wasn't afraid. That alone made her pause. She tilted her head, considering him. One clean strike, and you will fall, she said, stepping forward, her plasma blade humming as it extended from her wrist. I won't be gentle, human. Callan rolled his shoulders. Good, he said. I'd be disappointed if you were. A deep drumbeat signaled the start of the fight. Vorexia moved first, fast as a thunderbolt. Her blade sliced through the air, aiming for Callan's side. He should have been too slow to react, but he wasn't. Callan twisted his body, the plasma edge missing him by mere inches. His footwork was flawless, precise, like a dancer weaving through chaos. Vorexia felt a flicker of shock. He had dodged her first strike. She pressed forward, unleashing a storm of attacks. Each strike should have been the end, but Callan kept moving, slipping just beyond reach, making every attack wasteful, inefficient. Then, in a flash, he countered. His fist connected with her ribs, a solid, crushing hit. The impact rattled through her armor, forcing her back a step. The crowd's laughter died. Vorexia's golden eyes narrowed in disbelief. No human had ever forced her back before. Callan grinned. Still think I'm fragile. Her grip tightened on her weapon. She had underestimated him. That was a mistake she wouldn't make again. She lunged. This time, she didn't hold back. Her blade arced in a deadly curve. And this time, she struck. A deep slash opened across Callan's side. Blood splattered onto the arena floor. The impact sent him stumbling backward, his breath ragged. The fight was over. At least, it should have been. Vorexia straightened, expecting him to fall. Instead, Callan exhaled sharply, then smiled. Before her eyes, the wound began to close. Muscle fibers knit themselves back together. Skin sealed, leaving only a faint line where the injury had been. Within seconds, the gaping wound had disappeared entirely. A stunned silence swept through the arena. Even the Selvera elites, proud and unshakable, were frozen in disbelief. Vorexia took a slow step back, her mind struggling to process what she had just seen. Callan rolled his shoulders as if nothing had happened. He met her wide-eyed gaze and smirked. Round 2. For the first time in her life, Vorexia felt fear. Vorexia's golden eyes remained locked on Callan as he straightened, rolling his shoulders as if the deep slash across his side had never happened. The Selvera elites in the stands were silent, their amusement gone, replaced with something rare: uncertainty. No one spoke. No one moved. Callan looked down at his side, where the wound had been, and gave an impressed whistle. "Huh, that one actually stung." Virexia's grip on her plasma blade tightened. Her mind refused to accept what she had just witnessed. She had fought humans before, seen them bleed, seen them fall. They did not regenerate. "What are you?" she demanded, her voice low, controlled. Callan lifted an eyebrow. "You mean humans don't usually do this?" He gestured at his perfectly healed skin. "Guess I forgot to mention. I'm a little different." Virexia ground her teeth. A joke. Even now, after proving himself beyond anything she expected, he still joked. She lunged. This time, she moved faster, with the full force of her warrior instincts. If he could heal, then she would break him until he could not stand. Regeneration was useless if there was nothing left to heal. Callan dodged, barely, the plasma blade singing the fabric of his combat suit. He twisted, avoiding a second strike, then another. His speed was impressive, but she was faster. She was built for war. And then, she struck. Her knee drove into his ribs, sending him skidding backward across the arena floor. Before he could recover, she was on him, her fist slamming into his jaw. Callan's head snapped to the side, his feet leaving the ground for a second before he crashed down hard. The crowd erupted, roaring in approval. Now this was the fight they expected. Virexia stood over him, breathing heavily, waiting for him to stay down. But he didn't. Callan groaned, pushing himself up on one elbow, rubbing his jaw. He clicked his tongue. Okay, that one hurt. Virexia's eyes narrowed. His lip had split from the impact, blood dripping down his chin. But as she watched, the torn skin knitted itself back together. The swelling vanished. He laughed. "I think I'm finally warmed up." Virexia's stomach clenched. This was wrong. No species, no warrior, could withstand that kind of punishment and recover instantly. Even the most advanced biotech implants didn't work that fast. Was he some kind of experiment? A Terran weapon? Before she could voice her thoughts, Callan moved. His fist shot forward, not wild, not reckless, but measured, calculated. She barely blocked in time, his knuckles colliding against her bracer with enough force to make her arm numb. The crowd gasped. No human had ever struck a Xelvera warrior with that much power. Virexia staggered back, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. She had thought his strength lay only in his unnatural healing. She was wrong. Callan Drake was fast, strong, and relentless. He pressed forward, launching a rapid series of strikes, forcing her to block, dodge, react. She had been the hunter. Now she was the one on the defensive. She gritted her teeth. Unacceptable. With a sharp twist, she caught his wrist, using his own momentum to flip him onto his back. The ground shook as he hit. Before he could rise, she pressed her knee against his chest, her plasma blade humming at his throat. "Yield," she growled. Silence. Then Callan grinned up at her. "Make me." Something cold and unfamiliar ran down Virexia's spine. Not fear. Something worse. Curiosity. Virexia's golden eyes locked onto Callan's with an intensity she had never felt before. Her plasma blade hummed dangerously close to his throat, its heat distorting the air between them. His breathing was steady, unfazed by the fact that she could end him in an instant. Most warriors, most aliens, would tremble beneath her. They would beg or rage or submit. But Callan, he grinned. A slow, confident smirk that sent a strange, uncomfortable sensation through her chest. How could he be so calm? The crowd around them held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. But Virexia hesitated. Something about this human, this impossibility, made her hesitate. He had just healed from fatal wounds, fought her as an equal, and now lay beneath her blade with no fear in his eyes. A flicker of frustration tightened her grip. "Do you truly wish to die, human?" Callan chuckled, the sound low and amused. Not particularly. His hand rested against the arena floor, fingers twitching slightly. Readying himself. She saw it. She understood it. He wasn't giving up. With a sudden burst of movement, he twisted his body, knocking her off balance. Varexia gasped as she was thrown to the side, landing in a crouch just as Callan sprang to his feet. The crowd roared in shock. She was on her feet in an instant, plasma blade still humming, her muscles tensed, ready for him to attack. But he didn't. Instead, Callan stretched his arms behind his head, rolling his shoulders. All right, that was fun. What's next? Varexia stared at him. The arrogance. The audacity. Most warriors, even the strongest among her kind, would have been exhausted by now. But Callan stood there, perfectly fine, as if this was nothing more than a warm-up. Her fingers twitched over her blade. She should end this. Finish the fight, defeat him, prove that her kind was still superior. And yet, a voice boomed through the arena, breaking her thoughts. Enough. The High Warlord. Varexia turned, shoulders stiffening as the towering figure of Warlord Shenter stepped forward. His crimson armor gleamed under the artificial lights, his massive frame radiating authority. The entire arena fell silent. His piercing eyes moved between her and Callan, unreadable. Then, a slow, deliberate smirk crossed his face. It seems this human is not as fragile as we thought. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Varexia clenched her jaw. She knew what was coming next. Take him, the warlord ordered, to the training grounds. I want to see how far this human can go. Virexia's stomach tightened. The training grounds weren't for sparring. They were for warriors being shaped into weapons, pushed beyond their limits until they either became legends or broke. She turned back to Callan, expecting to see resistance in his face. Anger, fear, anything. Instead, he was still grinning. He cracked his knuckles. Well, he said, guess I'm getting a VIP tour. Virexia didn't know whether to feel impressed or concerned. Callan walked beside Virexia, his hands resting casually behind his head as they passed through the towering gates of the Selvera training grounds. The air smelled of hot metal and ozone, thick with the scent of warriors pushing their bodies to the limit. He could hear the clash of weapons, the impact of fists against training dummies, and the occasional roar of a beast somewhere deep within the complex. Virexia, walking slightly ahead, hadn't spoken since they left the arena. She was different now, more tense, focused. So, Callan said, breaking the silence, on a scale of light exercise to certain death, where would you rate this training? Virexia's golden eyes flicked toward him. That depends. On. If you are as unbreakable as you pretend to be. Callan smirked. Oh, I don't have to pretend. Virexia didn't reply, but the way her fingers tightened into fists told him she wasn't convinced. A set of massive steel doors hissed open before them, revealing a wide battleground, larger than the arena they had just left. Dozens of warriors trained in pairs or groups, some sparring hand-to-hand, others using advanced plasma weapons. At the far end of the grounds, standing like an unstoppable force, was Warlord Shenter. His crimson armor gleamed under the artificial lights, his arms crossed as he observed them. Virexia stopped and turned to Callan. Listen to me, human. Her voice was sharp, her expression serious. The warlord did not bring you here to be entertained. He wants to see if you are useful. Callan's smirk faded slightly. Useful, not just an oddity, not just a warrior, a weapon. He knew that game. He'd played it before. Virexia continued, stepping closer. If you fail, you will not be sent home. You will not be given a second chance. Her golden eyes narrowed. Do you understand what I'm saying? Callan held her gaze. He understood perfectly. But instead of fear, he felt something else. Excitement. I get it, he said. I just hope your people are ready for a surprise. Virexia sighed, shaking her head as she turned away. This human was impossible. "Step forward," Shenter's deep voice commanded. Callan walked toward the warlord, hands still casually at his sides. Around him, warriors paused their training, their eyes locked onto him with a mix of curiosity and doubt. Shenter gestured to the far side of the training grounds. A steel door rumbled open, revealing a dark chamber. From within, a deep, guttural growl echoed out. Callan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that doesn't sound friendly." Shenter smirked. "Meet your first opponent." Something massive emerged from the shadows. A creature with black armor like scales, burning red eyes, and claws that looked like they could slice through steel. A Vorthak. Callan whistled. "You guys sure know how to make a guy feel welcome." Vyrexia didn't look at him. She was watching the beast, her expression unreadable. "Survive," Shenter said, "and we will consider you worthy." The beast charged. Callan's muscles tensed, his instincts screaming at him to move. But instead of dodging, he ran straight toward it. Vyrexia's breath caught. And then they collided. The impact shook the ground. Callan slammed into the Vorthak like a battering ram, his feet skidding across the dirt as the creature's sheer mass tried to crush him. Its razor-sharp claws swiped downward, aiming to slice him in half. He twisted, just in time. The claws missed his chest, but raked across his arm, tearing through fabric and skin. Pain flared, white-hot and sharp, but Callan barely flinched. He'd felt worse. The beast snarled, its breath hot and rancid against his face. Its eyes gleamed with hunger. Callan grinned. "I don't think so, big guy." With a sudden burst of strength, he shoved the Vorthak backward. The creature stumbled, a fraction of a second's hesitation. But that was all he needed. He moved. Fast. Before it could recover, Callan dropped low, twisting around to grab its thick scale tail. Every muscle in his body strained, his strength pushed to its limit as he yanked the beast off balance. The crowd of alien warriors gasped. No one, not even the strongest Selvari soldiers, would have dared to try such a thing. The Vorthak was a walking tank, a predator known for its unmovable strength. But Callan, he was lifting it. The creature howled, its massive bulk ripped from the ground. With a roar of effort, Callan swung it sideways, sending it crashing into the arena wall. The impact shook the entire training ground. Silence fell. Dust and debris settled around the motionless beast. Callan straightened, rolling his shoulders as his torn arm regenerated before their eyes, skin knitting back together, muscle reforming. He flexed his fingers, then shot a look toward Shenter. "Is that worthy enough for you?" For the first time, the warlord said nothing. Vyrexia couldn't look away. She had thought humans were delicate, weak. But watching Callan now, the raw power, the unshakable confidence, the impossible healing, she felt something she had never felt before. A whisper of uncertainty, a flicker of admiration. Shenter finally spoke, his deep voice breaking the silence. "Perhaps we underestimated you, human." The gathered warriors murmured, their gazes shifting from Callan to one another. The doubt was turning to something else, respect. But Callan just grinned, his heart still pounding with the thrill of the fight. "Oh, I'm just getting started." The tension in the air was thick. The Vorthak lay motionless, dust settling around its massive form. Callan cracked his neck, shaking out his arms as if the fight had been nothing more than a warm-up. The gathered Selvari warriors whispered among themselves, their golden eyes flicking between Callan and Warlord Shenter. Vyrexia remained silent. She was still processing what she had just seen. No Selvari, not even the strongest among them, could have lifted a Vorthak like that. And that regeneration, it wasn't just fast. It was instantaneous. She finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "What are you?" Callan smirked, rubbing the spot on his arm where the wound had vanished. "Just a guy with a few good tricks." Shentur stepped forward, his heavy crimson armor gleaming under the artificial lights. His expression was unreadable. But then, the warlord did something unexpected. He laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that sent shivers through the gathered warriors. "Well done, human," Shentur said. "You have proven your strength, but strength alone does not make a warrior." Callan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what else am I missing?" Shentur's golden gaze sharpened. "Skill," he said simply, "and discipline." With a single motion, the warlord reached to his side and drew his weapon, a massive Excelvari warblade, its edge crackling with a faint blue energy. The murmurs among the warriors grew louder. Virexia's breath caught. He wouldn't, would he? Shentur turned his blade, the tip pointing toward Callan. "Fight me." Silence. Then, a ripple of shock. Callan blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "You believe yourself powerful," Shentur said, his tone calm, but firm. "But raw strength is nothing without refinement." He lifted his warblade slightly. "Prove that you are more than brute force." Virexia stepped forward. "Warlord." Shentur raised a hand, stopping her. "You know our ways, Virexia. If he seeks respect, he must earn it." Callan's smirk returned. His heart was already pounding, not with fear, but excitement. Fighting a massive beast, that was fun. Fighting a legendary warrior, that was a challenge. He exhaled and rolled his shoulders. "All right then, let's dance." Shentur moved first. One moment, he was standing still. The next, he was a blur of motion. His blade sliced through the air, coming straight for Callan's chest. But Callan was faster. He dodged, just barely, the blade missing him by a hair. The force of the swing sent a gust of wind past his face. He didn't have time to admire it. Shentur was already attacking again. Callan twisted, blocking the next strike with his forearm. Pain exploded through his body, but his bones didn't break. His regeneration kicked in instantly. He grinned. Not bad. Shentur's eyes narrowed. Then he vanished. Callan's instincts screamed. "Mo-V." Too late. A hard impact slammed into his ribs, sending him flying backward. He hit the ground and rolled, coming up onto his feet in a crouch. Virexia watched in disbelief. Callan had lifted a Vorthak, but Shentur had just sent him flying. The warlord lowered his blade. "You are fast," he admitted, "but not fast enough." Callan coughed, shaking his head. Then he grinned. "Oh, now it's getting interesting." He charged. Callan sprinted forward, closing the distance between himself and warlord Shentur in an instant. His muscles tensed, his mind sharp, analyzing every movement. The warlord was fast, unnaturally fast, but Callan had faced worse. Shentur raised his crackling warblade, bringing it down in a powerful arc. Callan dodged, rolling to the side, feeling the heat of the energy-coated edge slicing through the air just inches from his skin. He needed to be smart. Brute strength wouldn't be enough. Callan ducked low, using his speed to weave past Shentur's strikes. He wasn't just dodging, he was studying. The warlord fought with the precision of a master, every move efficient, every strike calculated. But Callan was unpredictable. Shentur swung again, aiming for his side. This time, Callan didn't dodge. He caught the warlord's wrist. A mistake. The moment Callan's fingers wrapped around Shentur's arm, the warlord twisted, using his momentum against him. Callan felt the world flip as his back slammed against the ground. Pain shot through his ribs, but he didn't stay down. His regeneration surged, healing the bruises before they could settle. He kicked off the ground, flipping backward onto his feet just as Shentur lunged again. Virexia watched in silence, her fingers curled into fists. Callan was different, not just because of his strength, not just because of his impossible healing. He was adapting. Every time Shentur knocked him down, Callan got back up faster. Every strike he dodged, he learned from. The warriors around them saw it too. Their murmurs had turned to awed silence. Callan grinned, shaking off the dust from his clothes. Not bad. You hit harder than a drop pod. Shenter's golden eyes narrowed. And yet, you still stand. Callan charged again. This time, he didn't just dodge, he countered. Shenter's blade came toward him, but Callan sidestepped at the last second. Instead of backing away, he stepped in closer, too close for the warlord's long weapon to strike properly. With a sudden burst of strength, Callan gripped Shenter's arm and twisted, using the warlord's own weight to throw him off balance. Shenter's feet skidded against the stone floor, forced back by sheer brute force. The warriors gasped. Virexia's eyes widened. No one had ever forced Shenter to stagger. The warlord exhaled slowly. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. Impressive, he admitted. Callan rolled his shoulders. I try. Shenter lowered his blade. The fight was over. The tension in the air shifted. The gathered warriors stared at Callan with something different in their eyes now. Respect. Shenter stepped forward, offering his arm in the traditional Selvari warrior's handshake. Callan hesitated for only a second before gripping the warlord's forearm. You fight like a beast, Shenter said. But you think like a warrior. Callan smirked. I take that as a compliment. Virexia exhaled, finally relaxing. She had thought of Callan as fragile. But now, she saw the truth. The human was far from delicate. He was a survivor. The air in the training hall felt different now. Callan was no longer an outsider. The Selvari warriors who once looked at him with skepticism and doubt now regarded him with something else. Respect. Even Shenter, the fearsome warlord, had acknowledged him. Virexia stepped forward, her violet eyes locked on Callan. There was no longer any trace of the amusement she once had when she thought humans were fragile. That belief was shattered now. You fought well, she said, her voice steady. Better than I expected. Callan smirked, rubbing his sore shoulder. That sounded dangerously close to a compliment. Shenter chuckled, a rare sound from the warlord. You have earned more than a compliment, human. You have earned your place. The warriors around them pounded their fists against their chests, a sign of respect in Selvari culture. The sound echoed through the hall. Callan had proven himself in a way none of them could ignore. Virexia stepped closer, studying him. Your regeneration. I have never seen anything like it. No human should heal that fast. Callan rolled his shoulder again. The bruises that had been there moments ago were already gone. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. Her eyes narrowed. What are you? Callan hesitated. How much should he tell them? I'm just a guy who doesn't like staying down, he said finally, flashing a grin. Virexia didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she extended her arm, the Selvari warrior's handshake. Callan gripped her forearm, just like he had with Shentar. At that moment, he knew things had changed. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He wasn't just the fragile human they had expected to break. He was one of them now. Shentar turned to the gathered warriors. This human is no longer an outsider. He is a warrior, a brother in battle. The hall erupted in cheers and war cries, the sound reverberating through the walls. Callan had come here to prove himself. And now he had. Virexia watched him for a moment longer, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small nod, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the great hall. Callan exhaled, running a hand through his messy hair. Well, he muttered to himself, that went better than expected. A new journey had begun, and Callan had no idea where it would lead.